For more on this from the Iranian perspective, I'm joined by Professor Mohammad Marandi from Tehran. He is the Dean of the Faculty of World Studies at the University of Tehran. And joining me here in the studio is Jamal Abdal, a Policy Director at the National Iranian American Council in Washington, D.C. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining us. Dr. Marandi, the talks have been extended. There's been no breakdown. What does this tell you about the status of the negotiations, and are you confident that there will be a comprehensive settlement by the end of June?
I'm not very confident because I don't think that the United States is ready for a comprehensive solution. The United States, despite the fact that we have a new administration and the administration has been showing a lot of flexibility, the United States is still not reciprocating. And I think that really has a lot to do with the fact that the United States still is unready to accept the reality of Iran post-revolution, and the reality that, as President Rouhani says, that Iran will not accept nuclear apartheid. So I think that's one major problem. I think the fact that the talks didn't break down shows that both sides want some sort of, or at least they want to prevent an escalation. The United States, after the catastrophe that it's created in the region through its alliance with the Saudis and the Turkish president, it's created these extremist organizations, this alliance. And of course, the escalation with the Russians over Ukraine and the Chinese over the South China Sea has really made it difficult for the United States to continue escalating with Iran. So I think for the time being, we're going to continue having this sort of stalemate until something happens.
Mr. Abdi, what do you make of the situation? As Dr. Marandi says, we've got to a point of stalemate. Do you have any hope that this will reach an agreement?
Well, look, I'm hopeful because the talks are continuing. I think both sides recognize that failure is not an option. If these talks break down, we are in a very bad place. Iran, the United States, the entire world. So these talks need to continue. The real question is, are the sides willing to make the necessary compromises? And at this point in time, I think that there are concessions that the United States needs to be willing to make regarding sanctions relief. I think it would be a real tragedy if political problems regarding sanctions are what held up a deal that's going to be good for the U.S. and for Iran. On the Iranian side, there's still compromises that need to be made regarding the size and the scope of enrichment. I think these are, on both sides, these are compromises that are very much in keeping with the interests of the parties, and it just is a matter of who is going to step up and make these compromises. And hopefully over the next 4 months, there can be creative solutions, and there can be a way for both sides to take further steps closer to each other's position, and we get a deal.
Dr. Marandi, you heard their compromises will have to be made. How substantive are the issues that divide these two sides?
They are substantial, and I think it's mostly because the United States really doesn't respect the sovereignty of countries that we have this problem. As we've been seeing over the past few days, no one is talking about Iran's problem with Russia or China. Even the French and the German and the British, as declining powers, they're looking to the United States. It's for the United States to make a decision. So the problem really lies with the United States. The United States, on the one hand, wants to limit Iran's rights within a framework that is much more smaller than that which is defined by international law. And that is something that President Rouhani says is unacceptable. The Iranians are willing to be very flexible. They've already shown more flexibility than the Americans, and even after the signing of the Joint Plan of Action, the Iranians, according to the IAEA, have complied 100%. But the Americans, on the other hand, they have continued to expand the sanctions regime by including more and more individuals and more companies, which is against the agreement. So the problem really is that the United States, on the one hand, is not abiding by the agreement, and on the other hand, the United States wants to limit Iran's rights to something that does not exist in international law. And President Rouhani simply will not accept such a thing. So if the United States really wants a deal, it has to accept Iran's rights, and Iran will be flexible, it will be more open, it will help to create an atmosphere where if any serious concerns exist, those will be dealt with. But ultimately, the red lines in Iran have to do with sovereignty, and sovereignty is something that no independent country can give up.
Mr. Abdi, you mentioned a moment ago domestic political considerations, the environment here in the United States. We know that Congress is not on board as far as these negotiations are going, as far as an agreement being reached. Can Congress impose more sanctions on Tehran while these talks are taking place, effectively scuttling them?
Well, look, the debate over here is actually, it's pretty fascinating how much it mirrors the debate in Iran. You have, I mean, with all due respect to the professor, the argument that the United States has violated the deal is completely inaccurate. I mean, the United States has enforced sanctions. That was part of the joint plan of action. That is not a violation. Obviously, it doesn't build confidence in the process. It would be better if that wasn't, something that was happening, but it is in keeping with the deal. On the same side, the Iranians, there are accusations in Congress that they violated the deal, which again are completely inaccurate. Iran did testing on an advanced centrifuge. They fed uranium into it, and people over here in the United States are saying that's a violation. It's not. It's in the JPOA. It's permitted. But here's the problem. On both sides, people are playing the blame game. And in Congress, the blame game is to say Iran's violating, they're not coming to the table and being serious, and so therefore Congress needs to impose new sanctions. This is an argument with serious traction on Capitol Hill. And I'm pretty confident that Republicans, once they take the Senate, they are going to move to pass new sanctions. If they do that, that will blow up the talks, and that will actually be a violation of the joint plan of action. That will then give legitimate arguments to those who are saying the United States is violating. And for that reason, I do expect the president to veto any sanctions bills that do come across his desk and work to protect this process so that neither side violates and we can get through to March and hopefully get a deal.
We have to take a break right now. We will continue our discussion with our panel in just a few minutes. You're watching The Heat. Stay with us.